What's up, everybody? It is I, Tevin El Chapo, friends call me Chop, and we are back with another episode of Chop Logic. Yes, woo, we back finally. I know, right? Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for subscribing to the YouTube channel if you have already, but if you haven't, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, be sure to like this video and comment below your favorite moments as we go along. And if you haven't watched the previous episodes, please be sure to check us out, man. You know, there's definitely an opportunity for you to maybe win some money on some of the previous episodes. You never know. You never know. So thank you so much for joining us. Of course, it's Chop Logic, where we bring the logic of things in my own special Chop way. And today's episode is super special, man. See, here's the thing. We are currently in a studio. Yes, we are currently in a studio. If you couldn't tell, we're not shooting at my house. Spoiler alert, I don't live here. All right. You know, we try to make sure that we're transparent as much as possible about that. But when it comes to studio spaces, you know, especially here in the metro Atlanta area in which we're currently filming at, there is a little bit of a saturation, but there is also some opportunities if you were considering owning a studio space. So that is what today's episode is going to be about. The pros and cons of owning a studio space and what to look out for if you decide to create a space, even in your home. So let's dive right into it. So first things first, man, you always got to consider the cost of owning a studio. So of course, you got to think about rent, and then from there, renovations. From there, you got to, you know, of course, buy equipment and things of that nature. And you always want to kind of just make sure that it's something that's within your means, right? The average studio space does not make money in the first 5 years. So that's something you kind of want to consider as well, especially here in Atlanta. Here in Atlanta, it's significantly harder. Atlanta, I would say places like maybe Houston, I would say even places like New York City, where there's a more of a saturation of studio spaces. It's a lot more difficult for you to not only maintain the space yourself, but also be able to monetize it directly, right? So those are some of the things that you want to consider. Like studio condos here in Atlanta usually average somewhere between 146 to almost $500,000 in the downtown area, in the midtown areas. So obviously you can get something more closer to the outskirts for significantly cheaper. But again, you still got to think about the cost of maintenance. You got to think about the cost of equipment. You think about the cost of, you know, just marketing. You know, people got to know where the space is. You got to also think about just how you're going to create the space for different things. Do you want this to be mainly an event focused space, or do you want it to be a content focused space? Some things to consider, right? So if you want it to be a little bit of both, you got to think about how you want to set design it. And you also got to consider just some of the things in terms of like, how much money are you really willing to spend to make sure that it happens adequately, right? So also you got to think about some of the legality behind it. So typically when it comes to owning a studio space, legally speaking, you have to be able to have a commercial space. It has to be used for commercial use, and it has to be up to code across the board, right? I mean, you have to have plumbing, you have to have HVAC set up, and you have to be able to have it adequately set in a commercial setting. So you can't necessarily rent out your home as a studio space, even though I've done that before. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you got to do what you got to do, you know what I'm saying? And I won't tell if you won't, but realistically, legally, you're not supposed to do that, right? Depending on like how your home is set up, especially if you're renting, I'm pretty sure that's a breach in your lease if you are renting your home or your apartment and you're essentially using it for commercial use. So you kind of want to be careful with that. You don't want to end up in a sticky situation, and you definitely don't want to end up homeless. Let's not ever be homeless. So some of the many benefits of owning a dedicated studio, first things first, is that you'll be able to create your own content at your own pace and your own speed. You know, once you have everything set up, you know, your own special way, your own special cadences, you can pretty much just come through, press record on the camera, press record on the audio, turn the lights on and off, and then you'll be good to go to knock out as much content as possible without having to pay hourly fees to somebody else, right? And then vice versa. You'll have a space where if someone else needed to create their content in, you'll have it automatically available to them. You could, you know, rent out for events. You can, just have that space openly available to you and your disposal, first things first, but also to the disposal of anybody else who may need it. So that's always a benefit. It'll also have the benefit of, like, let's say if you want to do a podcast similar to this one, right? The luxury of not having people come to your home to do any content is always amazing. I always tell people the biggest thing is to make sure that you are safe and that you're putting yourself in a safe position. So even if the studio is not in your home specifically, making sure that you're putting it in a safe area, especially if you plan on using it as a content space, because you don't want to put a bunch of cameras in the middle of the hood and advertise like, hey, we have a content space with thousands of dollars worth of video equipment. Come on down. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to put it, where you'll potentially be in danger and then potentially have your client base be in danger. You know what I mean? Like, that's not something that is going to warrant a lot of good reviews. If I pull up to your studio space and I see 5, 6 YNs standing outside, you know what I'm saying, ready to hit my car as soon as I get out, you dig what I'm saying? So it's just kind of like, you really got to be mindful of those types of things, especially, like I said, in Atlanta, where you could bend any corner and end up in the hood. You can go gentrified this way, bow, the hood, bow, gentrified. You feel what I'm saying? Like, it's damn near Russian roulette out here. So you just got to be really mindful of that. So those are some of the benefits in terms of owning your own studio. Like I said, just being able to have the luxury of having your own personal space without necessarily having to utilize any part of your home. Like, let's say if you had a small home, or if you didn't feel comfortable using parts of your home, or, like I said, bringing people into your home, if you wanted to have guests for your content, things of that nature, owning your own space would be one of the better reasons to do that. And then, like I said, it's a great place for the setup that can just live. So you can just have the setup just in place at all times, and then you can just kind of plug and play who sits in the space, and then you'll be pretty much good to go with that as well. And then a lot of the money that is, an investment first and foremost. But once you buy equipment, especially if you're buying high-end equipment the first time, you don't ever really got to buy it again. And then on top of it too, you can also rent the equipment outside the studio space. So, that's kind of like overhead. That's kind of like a one-time fees type thing. And then from there, you can pretty much find different ways to monetize on that. So those are different things to consider. Like, even if you were to hold an event, or, have a birthday, or, I will need to do personal photos, or just any type of personal content, you just always have like one dedicated space to it. So, some of the cons to that, of course, like I said, affordability. That should always be the first thing. Owning a studio space is not cheap, especially, like I said, if you're doing it in a area like Atlanta, where it is super competitive. So not only are you investing in the space, but you are also competing with other people all across the city. So there are some people that can make it happen, and I commend everyone who owns a space and, fully is successful in running the space. But also too, it takes time to not only market the space to get in a place where it's healthily making money, but you also got to think about just managing the space itself. Like, someone who's going to be there to take the trash out, someone who's going to be there to make sure that the lights are turned off, you know what I mean? Make sure there aren't any leaks, or someone that's literally like a property manager to that space specifically. Now, usually that is the person who owns the space who would do it, but there maybe have to be something you have to outsource. So you got to kind of consider those things. So not only do you have to pay for the space, but you also have to pay for employees to run the space as well. And, you just definitely want to be like very considerate of those things at all times, and make sure that you're not putting yourself in a financial hold for anything that may not be feasible for the long term. Because, like I said, it's going to take some time for the space to make you some money. That's just what it is. That's everything in life. You'll be real lucky if you are in a position where you are able to essentially make money immediately, or turn a profit, especially immediately, from doing any type of business venture off the rip, right? But especially when it comes to studio spaces, especially when it comes to like an area like Atlanta, Georgia, you just want to be very mindful of just not putting yourself in a terrible bind in any situation. So that's always the thing. You also want to make sure, that you put it, like I said, in the right areas, because some of the cons is, you can't control everything if you're not here, so if something were to happen, or, if there were a fire, God forbid, or if there was just anything that was outside of your control, you know, you always got to be mindful. Like, you got to pretty much treat this studio space like your second home. So like I said, some type of studio manager of some sort, or even you just being on site on a regular basis, even if it's not on a daily basis, just on a regular basis to make sure that everything is running as smoothly as possible. All right. And then in terms of like just doing a studio space in your home, there are plenty of pros and cons to that as well. Like I said, we don't want to bring randoms to our houses, at least not me personally. I don't want to do that. But also at the same time, like, you get the luxury of not having to leave the house to do anything. So it's kind of the same thing, right? You're already paying rent, you're already paying your mortgage, you're already living in that space. So it only makes sense that if you have the space to make it happen, that you create some type of content space for it, especially if you were serious about creating content, right? It will be significantly cheaper because, like I said, all you gotta do is buy the equipment, maybe one camera, a couple lights, a good microphone audio setup, and then from there, everything else will pretty much just be handled in post-production, and then you'll be good to go. So at that point, you know, it's little to no overhead once the initial investment is over. And that's something that, you know, can propel you into thousands of videos, or just a long-term investment in terms of just many, many hours worth of content being able to be created because of that. And you'll be pretty much, you know, just set for as long as possible. And then depending on how you have the setup, you can interchange certain things. You can move things out. If you decide to move out of your home, you can take it with you. And again, you're not adding any more bills on top of what you're already paying. And you have the convenience of not having to leave your home. So you can literally just be wearing a t-shirt and a jacket and then be wearing your pajamas under the table. I'm not wearing pajamas under this table, and we're not ducking the camera down to look. But I'm just saying, if you wanted to do that, you got the options. You know what I mean? Now, I will only suggest this for people who are doing solo content or content with maybe their family or roommates, people that they actually live with, mainly because you don't want to, again, put your safety at risk or jeopardize the safety of anybody who lives with you by bringing people that you don't know, or just bringing people around your space, or just, you know, the level of comfort, you know. So if you have a space, you know, you can definitely bring your friends on, you can definitely bring your family in, but I would just always be mindful of just making sure safety is always the number one priority, for one, and for two, that we set up a space that's convenient as possible, especially if you're trying to do it in your home. So, you know, also one of the biggest things you want to make sure of when creating a space in your home is customizing it to your own specific liking. So in terms of having a home studio, you can literally mix and match it because you're not in it to rent it to anybody else. This is strictly for you. So you can literally like customize it to the point of your specific liking down to the absolute T. And every single thing that you enjoy, every single thing that you want part of your branding, your marketing, you can incorporate it. You can put big old lights in the background. You can do black lights. You can put posters up of certain things, certain movies that you may enjoy. You can just do anything and everything that you specifically like. Have different colored lights depending on what colors you like. You know, things that you don't have to conform to a generalized space for. You know, when you're owning a studio space that is with the intent of having other people use it, you kind of have to use generalized things. Like, okay, we have colored lights, but these lights have to change colors, which, you know, also depends on the price, right? Or, oh, we have certain signage or certain posters, but they're a lot more conformed and uniformed to just anyone and everyone who wants to plug and play these things, right? We may have certain paintings that we want to use, right? But we don't particularly use anything that's super specific to just me. Because, you know, if it was up to me, I would have X, Y, and Z on the wall. You feel what I'm saying? I'll probably have a picture of Kobe, or, you know what I'm saying? Like something like that. But then if a Celtics fan came in, then it's like, oh, well, I don't want this Kobe behind me, no disrespect. You know, something like that, right? You always want to keep that in mind as much as possible. So when you have a home space, you have the luxury of being able to just full on customize it as much as you prefer. And then some of the things you also want to consider when you're doing any type of space, both home or just a literal studio space, investing into a space, is the sound quality. So funny enough, we have certain sound situations here at this studio that we're currently dealing with. We don't know if it's something going on in the ceiling or some animals shooting the fade or whatever. I don't know what's going on, but you always want to be mindful of just the sound quality of the rooms. You may have to soundproof rooms, especially if you're trying to do content spaces, and be very mindful of just what that takes and what part of the investment that is, right? So you don't want to necessarily use a room that's too airy. Like if you're shooting in your home, you don't want to use a room where people can hear your neighbors outside, or, you know what I'm saying, anything like that. Or me personally, I have neighbors now that been revving up dirt bikes and four-wheelers and stuff like that all the time. So luckily for me, I don't shoot my podcast there at all, but that is something that I would have to consider if I did decide to create a home studio. So, you know, even if you had like, you know, children or animals, like if the dog barking in the background or something like that, you always want to be mindful of that. A lot of those things, of course, get mitigated once you have your own personal space. And if you're putting it in the right area where it's already quiet naturally, then of course, a little bit of soundproofing will also help. Just make sure that the sound is bouncing off in the right ways. So those are things that you also want to just kind of consider. And then of course, you know, buying furniture for all these things as well. Buying the right furniture for your aesthetics. Again, you can buy things that are a lot more customizable at home than you can for like a generalized studio. But you also want to make sure that you have like, you know, something that looks clean, something that looks smooth, something that can be used and interchanged depending on even if your preferences change. So you always want to kind of keep those things in mind as well. Some type of computer should be on site. If you are owning an outside studio, usually people have a laptop. But even if it's not necessarily a computer that everybody has access to instantly, it should be something that, you know, you can do bookkeeping on, something that you can maintain appointments for if people were, you know, using the studio space. Just something that people can generally have access to, or at least the site manager can have access to. So you always want to make sure to have that. And then, like I said, just setting up a situation where, you know, not only the space can be utilized, but everything within the space can be utilized. And so even with the computer, you can set that up as an editing bay. So somebody wanted to come in and use the space as almost like a WeWork situation where they come in, they shot their content, now they can do some editing. You can do that for additional fees. You can rent out the equipment by itself for additional fees as well. Rent out the space for events, depending on what it is that you're looking to do. So yeah, so those are some of the things you want to consider. Definitely when it comes to owning your own personal studio space, I would say for one, make sure that you're prioritizing your content first. And I know that may be somewhat of a controversial take, but realistically, again, the odds of you being consistent with your content and that generating revenue, depending on where you put the studio space, are probably going to be faster routes to getting monetized for the space versus outright renting out a space, if that makes sense. Because some people don't necessarily know what proper models to rent out a space for. Some people don't know how to utilize, you know, the area that they're in, or even just market to the area that they're in specifically, or even just market in general. And some people don't even know how to manage a space. So you can have a affordable space that you can rent out for a feasible price. But then if you don't know how to manage it, then at that point, the space becomes useless because nobody wants to come there, especially if it's in a city where there are multiple studio options. And that's another thing I kind of want to make sure that I'm hitting on the head about this is realistically, at the end of the day, if you are in a major city like Atlanta, there's going to be a bunch of competition in the studio space realm. All right. There's going to be people who are very successful in the space. There's going to be people who aren't so successful in the space. It's the same thing like running a videography business. There's some people that make a bunch of money, who make 6 figures, 7 figures doing videography. Then there's some people who don't make any money off of it. And they probably work a 9 to 5 and they probably just, you know, do it on the side whenever they have time on the weekends. And there's nothing wrong with either one of those things. It's all about, at the end of the day, what are your goals and what makes you happy in your life? Because at the end of the day, you're the only one that can live your life for you. So is having a studio space going to make you happy? Is having a studio space going to make you consistent in your content creation first and foremost? Are you able to run a studio space? Do you have the capacity? Do you have the experience? Do you have the capacity or the experience to market a studio space? Have you checked what the competition is doing when it comes to owning a space? These are just things that you realistically have to consider. Like, are these things going to make you happy or take you to the next level of where it is you want to be in your life? Because if it's not, then consider just creating a space in your home or just renting out a space like we do. I don't have any intention of owning a space. And people ask me why. And it's really just because I don't really need a space for anything. I don't particularly have the time to manage a space. You know what I mean? I have great relationships with people who own spaces. Much love to everybody I know who owns a space, because everybody I know who owns a studio space doing great. All right. Then, you know what I'm saying? I've been lucky to know people who genuinely know what they're doing with their spaces. But not every space is successful. You feel what I'm saying? And that's kind of like every part of entrepreneurship. Not every entrepreneur is successful in whatever niche that they're in. And it's not easy to be successful in these niches, especially being in a studio space area like Atlanta, where everybody's doing content, everybody has a space, everybody's doing something somewhere. All right. And just one thing I will say as well, if you're trying to own a space, you kind of got to know something about content. All right. No disrespect to anybody, but it's like, if you don't already have experience in content creation, if you already don't have experience as a creative, then maybe think twice about jumping into owning a content space. You know what I mean? I think that the issue that I've noticed is that a lot of people own the space without knowing what it takes to even create content. And it's like, how do you own a space without knowing how to create content and then expect it to be successful in a content space? You feel what I'm saying? Like, because essentially you'll be leaning on the resources of other people. You know what I mean? I've had plenty of people ask me about doing partnerships when it comes to their content spaces, and they want me to come in and manage it, or, oh, they'll book the clients and then I'll come in and handle all the production and things of that nature. And unfortunately, a lot of situations kind of fall to the wayside for me personally, because I am not really in a position where I'm overly hell bent on having a space. You know, God forbid, if anything were to happen to the space that I'm using right now, I'm going to find a way. All right. I'm going to find a way. You know what I'm saying? Like, this space is not the end all be all for this podcast or for my content creation. So, and that's for any space that I'm in, you know, and like I said, I built great relationships with amazing people, but at the end of the day, I can't particularly say that having a space is enough for someone like me to want to partner with that person, mainly because it's not necessarily enough in it in terms of where I benefit in that situation, if that makes sense. Realistically, a partner who can help me in a studio space setting is someone that's going to give me 100% access to the space, and someone that's going to give me 100% access to the clientele, and someone who's going to bake my rates into the rates of the studio. Meaning that, like, you can't just book somebody first and then ask me if I'm free second. Like, no, they've already paid. I've already been associated with the calendar to know when these dates are booked. And they already know what services they're getting from me. And these are just all hypothetical because, like I said, I'm not in the business of even doing partnerships like that. But if I were, that would probably be the most ideal. So it wouldn't be a situation where you would already have the client and then you call me and say, like, hey, are you free to shoot them real quick? Like, no, like, they would already have paid my rate on top of the studio rate. We both already made the money. You just let me know when to be there. And you really shouldn't have to let me know to be there, because essentially, if we're doing a partnership like that, I should already have access to the calendar. So my calendar should already be adjacent to the studio's calendar to know when I should be there versus where I could be somewhere else. In an ideal world, of course, all this is hypothetical. Again, I don't do partnerships like that. So, but that's not something that I would say everybody should be against, right? So if you do want to do a partnership like that, if you are a videographer, a photographer, someone owns a space and you want to do a partnership with them, I mean, if it makes sense for you, make it make sense. you know, but the biggest thing is making sure that you're working with someone who understands the content creation process of things, understands that you are not a space manager, meaning that all the things that a space manager should be doing, you should not be doing. You are just the creative or the producer of the content. And that's it. So they should not be asking you to take out no garbage. They shouldn't be asking you to check on no leaks. They shouldn't be asking you if the alarm go off randomly for you to pull up. Like, none of that has anything to do with you. All right. You give them a rate for what it is that you can and can't do. You bake it into the studio rate. If someone wanted a full-blown production versus someone who just wants the space and they'll figure it out without anybody producing the content. And then you give them some type of access to either your calendar via Google or Calendly, whatever the case may be, so they know when you're available. So when they're booking the space for these certain services where you would need to be there, it's already solidified, you know? So these are just conversations, relationships that are had. And then, of course, if you do decide that you want to use the space for yourself, then you'll have full access to it for yourself as well. So that's pretty much it. That's all I got. You know, like I said, if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to hit us up in the comments. But we are going to go to break. And when we come back, we're going to go for the good old fashioned trivia. This video is sponsored by Chop House Media Group. Now listen, podcasting is hard, all right? There's a lot of moving parts to a successful podcast, whether it be the shooting side, the post-production side, the audio mixing and mastering, just having the right strategy and know how to even get this podcast in the right places and getting it into the right positions to get monetized. And that is where Chop House Media Group helps out at. We have coined the phrase, the podcast in the box, where we pretty much facilitate anything and everything that you need to run a successful podcast, between the production, the post-production, the strategy, and the tips and tricks that you need to be 1,000% successful in every single aspect of your podcasting career. Now, if you are interested in being a part of this and making sure that you get your podcast to the next level, whether you are just now starting out your podcast or you are already in the podcasting field but want to take it to another level, be sure to hit the link below and schedule your free consultation with us to make sure that we get your podcast up and going further than you can ever imagine. All right, again, thank you to Chop House Media Group for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the show. And we're back. All right, so you already know what time it is. I'm going to close my laptop because we are time for trivia. So usually, if you've been watching the show, you know how this goes, but I'll explain it anyway. Usually we have trivia questions from my producer, Javane. Unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts, my good brother was not able to be here, but my other good brother, Jason, is here. Say hello to the people real quick. Jason.
What's going on?
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Javane. He's in our hearts and our spirits. Of course, he's perfectly fine. Ain't nothing wrong with him. He just had other business that he had to do, but he will be back for sure. He's still part of the show. But Jason is going to be here today giving us some trivia. If I get the questions right, it should be 2 out of 3 correct. Is it correct? 2 out of 3 questions? How many questions he gave you?
Let's see.
All right, we still trying to figure out. So it should be 2 out of 3 correct. Yeah. If I get 2 out of 3 correct, I get to keep my money. If I get 2 out of 3 wrong, I give a cash prize to the audience. So to be eligible for the cash prize, first thing first, you got to be subscribed to the YouTube channel. Second of all, you got to make sure to like this video and comment below your favorite part from the episode, and we will randomly select somebody from the comment section. So, Jason, let's make it happen. First question.
All right. First question is, which of these is a realistic downside of exclusively working from a home-based creative space? A, higher liability insurance costs. B, unpredictable lighting and background noise limitations. C, reduced internet bandwidth for uploads. Or D, risk of zoning violations for product photography.
What was the question again?
The question is, which of these is a realistic downside of exclusively working from a home-based creative studio? Or creative space, sorry.
Okay. And then what were the answers again?
A, higher liability insurance costs. B, unpredictable lighting and background noise limitations. C, reduced internet bandwidth for uploads. D, risk of zoning violations for product photography.
I feel like at least the first three are good options. I don't know about that last one with zoning stuff. When you're doing a product, anything, zoning is hardly ever an issue. We didn't even talk about insurance. Yeah, you need insurance. You need renter's insurance. You need insurance on your studio space. If you got equipment, it'd be great if you had insurance for that too. All right, you definitely should be having some insurance. I didn't bring that up initially. I mean, they all sound good, brother. I don't really.
So do you need me to repeat anything?
Give me B and C again.
B, unpredictable lighting and background noise limitations. Or C, reduce internet bandwidth for uploads.
Again, like they still sound pretty good. I'm going to go with B. Final answer?
B, final answer?
Yeah.
That is correct. Cool. Unpredictable lighting and background noise limitations.
Yeah. Of course, you know, like I was saying before, you want to buy some lights if you do a home studio because you don't want unpredictable lights. And then, you know, sound, same reason you want to soundproof the space. But also another thing too, internet, whether you have it at home or you got it in the actual studio, if you own a studio space, you're going to need some internet in that thing. You know what I'm saying? Some good internet at that. Yeah. So those are actually, that was trickier than it sounds, trust. So we can go to the next.
All right. Next question. Why might sound control be more difficult in a home setup compared to a professional Atlanta studio space? Is it A, residential construction rarely includes acoustic treatment? Is it B, homes are more likely to have natural reverb, ideal for voiceover? C, home HVAC systems are designed for silence? D, studios are required by code to be soundproof? So,
all right,
so the question again was, why might sound control be more difficult in a home setup compared to a professional Atlanta studio space?
Word.
A, residential construction rarely includes acoustic treatment. B, homes are more likely to have natural reverb, ideal for voiceovers. C, home HVAC systems are designed for silence. Or D, studios are required by code to be soundproof.
I'm going to say A, but I'm going to have to holler at my good brother about these questions. I'm going to say A, though.
A?
Yeah.
Residential construction rarely includes acoustic treatment.
Sure.
That is correct.
Hot damn. Yeah, yeah. I'm not trolling. These all right, let's just go. Let's just go. I'm not going to explain it.
Which of the following best explains why a studio space in Atlanta might offer a branding advantage over a home setup? Is it A, clients assume better quality from commercial spaces? Is it B, studios in Atlanta are zoned for live work, which boosts SEO? Is it C, location tags tied to commercial addresses boost Google business visibility? Or D, professional studios qualify for tax exemptions not available to residential creators?
I'm already keeping my money regardless. So I mean, I'll give me. Whoa, pause. I'm about to say, give me D again.
Professional studios qualify for tax exemptions not available to residential creators.
That sounds like a lie to me. Give me A again.
Clients assume better quality from commercial spaces.
I'm gonna say A.
That is incorrect.
What was the answer?
The answer is C. Location tags tied to commercial addresses boost Google business visibility.
What was the question again?
Which of the following best explains why a studio space in Atlanta might offer a branding advantage over a home setup? I agree with you.
I'm gonna holler at my good brother Jermaine.
I agree with you.
What does that even having? So basically, like if I tag this studio right now on my Instagram on a story or something like that, That's supposed to get more visibility for the business, for my business or the studio. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah. I thought so, and this is in my head. I feel like marketing is being conflated with branding because to me, branding is kind of like what makes you unique.
100.
This is my brand.
Right.
So a branding advantage would be like a differentiator, right? Or what, or quality or whatever. So to me, it's like clients assume better quality from commercial spaces. That's the branding advantage of why I want a studio space over a home space. So people are like, this is official. That's in my head. I'm not sure Google business visibility enhance.
I genuinely don't believe that that's going to do anything.
Yeah, because I'm just like, people like, if Trillith wasn't on Google, but you walk into Trillith, but
even if it was, if I went to that space one time and then I shoot from another space and I shoot at another space, how does all these spaces being geotagged or whatever the case may be helping my business? I'm gonna holler at my good producer Jermaine about this, but yeah,
I'm just saying, like, I think a client going to Trillith to shoot your podcast would do more for you than you saying I'm chop shots. I don't know.
I don't listen. I'm still standing.
You got 2 on 3, 2 out of 3.
2 out of 3 means look, we running home with the money. So unfortunately, this ain't one of them episodes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for Jason for helping out, and thank you so much for listening. You know, if you got any piece of game from anything that we said, still let us know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like this video. Also subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. You know, wherever you can get podcasts at, we're there by the time this comes out. Yeah. So those questions were a little shaky, but it wouldn't be a Chop Logic episode if the questions weren't shaky. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch you guys next time, and God bless. Peace.